States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Please be seated. The first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I'll move it. Second by Nelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Now, a bit of housekeeping here. I did ask our assistant county attorney if this would be permissible, and it would be. I was just told a couple seconds ago that Chris McGowan is here to present something to the board. So we're going to make a little exception, if that's all right with the board, and allow him to come before we have a slew of public hearings later today. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Chris McGowan. My address is 101 Pierce Street, where I serve as the president of the Siouxland Chamber of Commerce and the Siouxland Initiative. Today, I'm here in my capacity as the leader of the Siouxland Initiative to present congratulations and an award, a keepsake, if you will, from the Siouxland Initiative, which is reflecting the fact that the Siouxland Metro was ranked the #1 community in the United States of America for economic development on a per capita basis by Site Selection Magazine for calendar 2023. Those awards came out this spring. And on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Siouxland Initiative, we want to thank Woodbury County and the supervisors in particular for your continued support of our economic development efforts. Obviously, we're in the midst of a couple of pretty confidential and important projects, and we appreciate the mutually beneficial relationship that we enjoy. But on behalf of the tri-state community, we wanted to present this award to the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors and hope that you'll find a prominent place to share this.
thank you.
Well, Chris, I want to thank you guys at the Chamber and everybody involved in the business community, because our role is pretty simple. We just lead and govern in a way that's, you know, the most cost-effective for the taxpayers and the businesses. And they do the development, they bring the growth, they reinvest, and they're putting millions out in all these projects. And, you know, we obviously appreciate what they're doing, because when they reinvest in our community, it makes us look good too. So, you know, give that appreciation to those chamber members and those that are involved that have made these projects happen.
Thank you. And we're happy to have a long line of these sort of awards upstairs in the board office. So it's a good thing to keep going. All right, moving on, items 2 through 8 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 2 is approval of the minutes of the April 16th meeting. Item 3 is approval of the claims. Item 4 from Human Resources includes A, approval of memorandum of personnel transactions, and B, authorization to initiate the hiring process. 5 from Building Services is approval of items to be auctioned per the personal property disposition policy. 6 from Board Administration is approval of notice of property sale resolution for parcel also known as 3220 11th Street for Tuesday, May 7th at 4:35 p.m. 7 from Secondary Roads is to approve the permit to work in the right-of-way for the City of Sioux City and to direct the chair to sign the permit. And 8 from Board Administration is from Finance Director Dennis Butler, is to set the public hearing for the FY25 proposed budget for May 7th, 2024 at 5 p.m. The reason for this item is one of the county newspapers did not publish notice in time, as the county board office was assured would happen. And so unfortunately, even though the lapse was due to an outside entity, by law, we have to work with the department and republish this notice. So this has happened a couple times, and
2 years in a row.
2 years in a row. So we look forward to any state legislation that would allow us to do so online.
I'd move the consent agenda, and we'll be abstaining from item number 2.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0 with Taylor abstaining on item 2. We have a few minutes before our 4:40 PM set time, so we'll go ahead with item 9 from the Board of Supervisors. Mr. Radig, this is information item to discuss staff replacement to coordinate United Way fundraising activities.
So United Way had reached out to have a meeting with Don Norton and I. I've kind of been the de facto United Way liaison from the supervisors because economic development and community development had been the department that coordinated these things, and I was the liaison to them. Now, obviously, we've had a staff director leave in that position. So Dawn Norton's kind of done most of the work, and she'd like to step back from that. So if there's somebody within the county that loves this kind of work, Dan, I'm sure you do, we would be taking volunteers to meet with Aaron from United Way and myself and see if we could fill this role. So it's an open invitation to county employees that feel led to do this. And that's all I really have. If we don't find somebody this year, Donna's willing to do another year, but obviously prefer to train somebody or teach somebody in ways of taking that over.
Okay. Well, anyone have any other thoughts on the board on this, or? Okay, well, you know who to contact if you do. All right, is that all, Mr. Radig?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 10. This is from Planning and Zoning, Director Dan Priestley. He has items A through I for item 10, including 3 public hearings. We have time to start with item A. This is to receive the Zoning Commission recommendation for zoning ordinance text amendments to the floodplain management ordinance section from their March 25th meeting. Go ahead.
Okay, well, the zoning commission sends you their recommendation for the amendment to the floodplain ordinance so we can retain our good standing in the National Flood Insurance Program. This coincides with the new maps, floodplain maps that have been calculated using LiDAR technology that become effective on July 17th of 2024. The ordinance before you amends a few portions within there. This ordinance is given to us, mandated to us by the feds and the DNR, and so we basically, to retain our good membership in the good standing, we comply with that, basically, so.
Any questions?
I'd move to receive the zoning commission recommendation for zoning ordinance text amendments to the floodplain management ordinance section from their March 25th, 2024 meeting.
I'll second the motion by Taylor. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 10B is our 4:40 PM set time. This is a public hearing to consider text amendments to that floodplain management ordinance section 5.03. The public hearing is now open for anyone who wishes to speak for or against this.
Okay, one real quick thing for me. We will be requesting an effective date on it to coincide with the floodplain maps. So on the ordinance, we'd like for it to say effective date July 17th, 2024. Just want to add that for the record.
Okay. All right, is there anyone to speak on the floodplain management item? Seeing none, I'll move the public hearing be closed.
Second.
Second by Radig. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item C is to approve the first reading of the ordinance. I'll move it.
Second.
Second by Taylor. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item D is to receive the zoning commission's final report and recommendation of the Woodbury County Comprehensive Plan for 2040 from their March 25th meeting. Mr. Priestley?
Yes, the comprehensive plan has been an ongoing project for years. The county, back in late 2020, contracted with Simcoe to explore, engage the public of Woodbury County of what kind of county we want to be up through 2040. So there's been lots of public engagement throughout the process. We have ran into a few hiccups with the COVID virus during the time of 2020 and other zoning-based issues like pipelines, et cetera. But we feel that we're at a point now that we can present this comp plan forward, as it's a very important asset for the county as we consider a future public policy. With us tonight is Corinne Erickson from Simcoe, and I would like to ask for her to offer some comments about the plan.
Hi, good evening. Yeah, so as Dan mentioned here, this comp plan has been several years in the making. Development of the plan began in 2021 with funding from the CARES Act for COVID-19 relief. Early in the plan development, we put together a steering committee to help guide the process. We had representatives from emergency management and emergency services, county engineering, the county conservation board, law enforcement, board of supervisors, zoning, and community and economic development. So together with this group, we put together a public survey, and that was distributed throughout the county, and we received input from over 450 residents. As he mentioned, we did run into some pauses throughout this planning process. So the county and Simcoe were both dealing with staff changes. So we resumed in the fall of 2022. The goals and objectives were created based on survey results and input from the steering committee. We hosted 4 open house events to show the draft goals and objectives to the public. Last spring, the complete draft plan was publicized, and we had another public open house here in the courthouse. The draft was also presented to the Zoning Commission, Board of Appeals, and Board of Supervisors last year. So over this time, we feel confident that the plan has been developed with many opportunities for public engagement. And that's just a little bit of background. I do want to add for the record that there have been a couple of changes from when the Zoning Commission approved the draft. We updated there's a timeline of public engagement, so we just updated those with the correct dates and corrected a couple of typos. They also recommended for approval with a change to one goal in the land use chapter. So there's a goal about renewable energy on page 128, which I think is page 219 of the agenda packet. And so we added the phrase for personal and private use to differentiate between utility scale and personal use of renewable energy infrastructure. But other than that, the plan is as presented to the Zoning Commission. And I can take any questions.
Any questions? Yes.
Does that exclude utility solar?
Please,
Yeah, everybody to the mic. So Leo Yocum asked, Leo Yocum asked if that excludes utility solar.
So this goal is about, well, let me find the exact wording for you here. So the goal is to plan for the creation and use of alternative and renewable energy sources in Woodbury County. So the first bullet point under there for an objective is support landowners' individual choices to implement renewable energy infrastructure, and then we added for personal and private use.
Mr. Taylor?
So what I hear you saying is that for personal and private use on a residence, but not to place, for example, utility solar and ag preservation or some other designation outside of the industrial areas. Is that a fair
That's
summation?
fair, yes.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Leo? It doesn't. So,
This is for clarifying questions on the report itself. If it's in regards to solar, there is another public hearing about that. So if you have a question about what the report means, by all means. Okay, would you approach, please, and okay.
I move to receive.
Second motion by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Leo Yocum, 1691 250th Street. I was at that zoning meeting when it was presented, and basically, an individual got up with regards to, he's the chairman of the, not the zoning, but the Board of Adjustments. And he wanted a change with regards to how utility solar would be handled. And I believe that part of this process was for inclusion on everything. We have, in our county, we have a lot of acres. We're about the third largest county in the state of Iowa for ag. This sheet in front of you is showing what the disbursement is, how ag relates to the overall economy of this county. These figures are brought by the Department of Energy. These figures are used for how the Washington decides on the farm program. These are federal statistics. I think that our county has to be willing to adapt throughout the next 20 years and not rule out utility solar. I think we have to be able to adjust. The big expense in this county, probably the biggest share in the agricultural area, is secondary roads. Secondary roads supports agriculture. Utility solar can just be another avenue that those agricultural acres help pay the bill for secondary roads. It's not intrusive, it's not invasive. So I think utility solar should still be included as a viable opportunity for this comprehensive plan. Bear in mind, we're looking 20 years down the road. We could be looking at 27 or 28, Port Neal shuts down. It's a possibility. I think we have to realize that it's a good source of income, it's clean energy, and I think it's a wave of the future. So I don't think it should be excluded from the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Okay. Well,
Any questions?
well, I asked you if you had a clarifying question, and I just heard an opinion, so I apologize, but this is a better place for the public hearing portion. Is there any questions about the report itself or the recommendation itself? Hearing none, I'll move to receive it. Item 10D.
Second.
Second by Nelson. See no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. We're on item 10E, which is our 4:42 PM set time. This is to conduct the first public hearing for the consideration of the proposed Woodbury County Comprehensive Plan 2040. And we've already heard one of those speakers, and the public hearing is now open for anyone else who would like to address the board on the comprehensive plan.
I just want to ask the board to, Corinne had mentioned some changes since the zoning commission with a typo as well as the timeline. I'd simply like to ask the board if they want to receive the pages that those changes were made, just so we have a record of it.
Sure. I'll move to receive.
Second.
Second by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Okay, well, hearing and seeing none, I'll move the public hearing be closed.
Second.
Second by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 10F is to approve the first reading of the comprehensive plan. I'll move it.
Second.
Second by Nelson. Any discussion from the board? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Appreciate everyone's work on this, long process. Item 10G is to receive the zoning commission report and recommendation for zoning ordinance text amendments to utility scale solar energy systems, conditional use from the March 25th meeting. Mr. Priestley.
Yes, September 11th, 2023, this process began in the city of Mobile, the community center. And since that time, we've had 8 public meetings. 6 of them were public hearings, 2 were work sessions for the zoning commissioners. And going back and looking, about a year ago, we were tasked, the commission, to look at solar policy. And at the time, about a year ago, we looked at both the private or residential side in conjunction with the utility scale solar. And as you may recall, before last fall, late last summer, a recommendation was brought to the board for removing the conditional use permit for residential side to put us more in par with the city as far as the residential. And at that time, there was a recommendation for utility solar as a conditional use on agricultural land. And at that point, it was kind of discovered through the public hearing proceedings that we might need to look at that further because of the intensity and magnitude of utility scale solar. A big distinguishing factor of utility scale solar is it takes up quite a bit more acres than your average conditional use permit. And so the commission started exploring by engaging the public, analyzing data, and through the series of meetings, we learned quite a bit from the public, kind of about the general history of Woodbury County, kind of what the meanings are of agricultural preservation, how expectations are for the usage of those respective lands. And one of the base things we had to look at is our existing policy. And our existing policy is that the general industrial area, since at least 2008 under the zoning ordinance, is where we would cite utility scale solar. So in other words, if we got an application in 2010, solar would be likely put in that area south of the airport in the industrial zone. A couple years back, Mid-American Energy went through the conditional use permit process down there at Port Neal Road, down near their campus, went through the process, had the facility put into place. So I just want to be very clear here with the zoning commission policy. It's sort of retaining the status quo of having the utility solar on industrial land, the general industrial land, but with added features. And that was definitely identified at the time the commission was directed to look at this further. And so with the intensity of these type of projects, decommissioning, of course, is a very important aspect of returning the land back to a reasonable condition after these projects. Other road use agreements and items are put into place. And we also examined the communication link between how a conditional use permit works. And traditionally, they go to the zoning commission, then to the Board of Adjustment. Under the proposal before you, we do add the Board of Supervisors on there, in addition to, of course, not only looking at the agreements associated with the project, but also considering the building permit as well. And so trying to put a all-hands-on-deck approach for looking at these kind of projects to maximize the communication chain was a major priority there. So through the course of the debate, we learned a lot. from the public. I know that the city of Sioux City brought up the concern. We had a letter from the mayor. It kind of requested setbacks at one point from the corporate line. Traditionally, we haven't had setbacks installed in the conditional use permit process. It was kind of part of the debate, I know, at one of the last couple meetings, and the commissioners actually had setbacks listed in the proposal, but they went back and kind of looked through the tradition of doing these conditional uses and removed those setbacks out of concerns on the limited amount of acres that may be available inside of those respective industrial areas. And so I would have to say that through the course of each of these meetings, we compiled a lot of data, a lot of qualitative data. We tried to do our best to have some form of a transcript or information that each and every individual offered to the commission, because it's been a very passionate debate on both sides of the issue as far as the different aspects of how it could affect the long-term history of Woodbury County and the expectations of all landowners. So I have to give the commission a lot of credit on their steadfast efforts to carefully scrutinize and look at the material. Just the amount of time alone demonstrates the amount of research, the amount of reading, the aspects that kind of took place in terms of doing that. So kind of going back then after going through this journey, we kind of do return to the status quo as far as the general industrial area, but I think one of the most essential parts is shining more light on the process and involving the supervisors, involving the agreements and the clarification that it comes to these companies as they enter into the county and kind of know further what to expect. So that's one of the things I think was properly identified by the board last year on having a little bit more teeth or more detail into what the conditional use process is. The criteria that we normally use through a conditional use are open-ended in a lot of respects that charge us to all look at the aspects of public health and safety and the items that we regulate as a whole. And so it's up to us as a staff as well as a commission and a board of adjustment to look at all the respective areas that might pop up in an application, including one of the greatest parts is the public hearing, when we really learn what's going on in the neighborhoods at the most local level, when the citizens show up and tell us and show us things that we're not necessarily able to identify without their input. So with that said, it's definitely been an intricate process, and that's all I've got for now.
How was I guess maybe this would be before the public hearing, so I guess, because we
If you want to
haven't
ask him,
received this yet.
no, we haven't, but if you have questions about it, you can ask.
I was gonna ask how the votes kind of weighed down, like, from the individual members, you know, what concerns were brought up, I guess, as far as AP versus GI versus.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. It did end up being a 4-to-1 vote as far as out of the zoning commission. The commissioners, again, offered the concern about the respective area after really much engaging the public. There was an aspect that utility solar, and this has been debated through the process, is utility solar an industrial activity or not? And we know that that's been debated. It will continue to be debated. The commissioner that voted against the recommendation felt that there should be other opportunities available across the county, and so he saw that maybe there's other zoning districts that could be feasible at some point. And I believe he did make a reference to one of the initiatives that they originally looked at was the overlay that we had talked about here at one point. And they did explore the overlay The overlay, generally, what we kind of saw with it is it's pretty fresh in some of the communities, like out in Lynn County, Scott County has it. But what entered into the debate on the overlay district was, how do you measure that? How do you come up with which area is appropriate or not for an overlay? The first thing that you find is that counties like Scott County would hang their hat on the corn suitability rating. Then we right away went into the debate on which one is correct. This CSR meets this, but it could, growth is good here, but not here. This farmland doesn't have this exact number, but what I'm getting at is Scott County used that as a distinguishing factor to say that's not good enough for farm grounds, so therefore it would be eligible for solar, kind of under their policy. So finding the area to hang the hat on as the distinguishing factor makes the overlay much more difficult to achieve. I know we were asked to kind of look at slope and some of those others, and we didn't really see a distinguishing factor where you could really, in a fair, equitable way, lock in something that we could weigh across the entire county.
You have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the industrial areas, is there an excess of 2,500, 3,000 acres where utility solar could potentially go in the future? Is there that empty bandwidth, for lack of a better term?
Well, we would like to say there's definitely room down there, but I do think that the challenge for that is the willingness of the property owners to go into those agreements. I think we kind of come down to market choices. The folks that are fortunate enough to own the land down there in the industrial are kind of in the catbird seat as it comes to what is the most economically feasible for me on my property, whether I bring this industrial business here or whether the bottom line meets that industrial aspect. So it really kind of comes down to comparing the bottom line. There would be enough room, but it would definitely be limited as far as how much industrial parcels are involved. But again, this being a status quo policy, we've been subject to this same exact policy if we were pursuing a development standpoint from solar since 2008. So we're not doing anything, different as far as which lands are available.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate kind of the pre-meeting to help me understand. So if someone wanted to go from, let's say, ag preservation and be rezoned into industrial, based on our prior conversation with full transparency and full disclosure, it's probably not likely, like a 92 to 98% chance that that person who wants to be rezoned voluntarily is going to be denied that. And so I guess bottom line, without, kind of dancing around it, utility scale solar is essentially, Woodbury County's not open to that. I know we'll say it's in the industrial area or those who want to be rezoned voluntarily, but the practical reality is it's not going to happen. Very much an uphill climb for those who would pursue that. Is that a fair statement, just for full disclosure of what we're talking about here?
It's fair based on the steps to get there. There's steps, but it would be challenging. One of the first criteria of a rezone is looking at the development plan, and we say and the consideration of the future land use map. There is possible discretion as far as interpretation on reasonable look at willingness for these utility renewable policies. And so if an application came to the board, or it would have to go to the zoning commission first and for a recommendation. So I think it's tough to throw out the hypothetical, but if an application came in and X amount of acres were requested to go to industrial application, I think it would have to be given its day for consideration at the zoning commission level, and it would have to be sent over to the Board of Supervisors through that process. But there is a level of scrutiny. We have areas even in the existing language that CSR would be a factor, and various other factors to it. So it might come down to some type of interpretation, but typically we look to the map, the future land use map, as the guide on whether seeing an area of the county is appropriate or not. And I've seen most of the time, the few rezones that I've been involved with, they've aligned the stars on the map. And the typical ones that we've brought to the Board of Supervisors are maybe like an AP to an AE. So somebody can have some extra houses in a quarter section, which is typically not too controversial depending on the respective area. So it kind of comes down to, I would have to say, an interpretation of all of the factors that are involved in the application by the fact that it says mention the consideration of the development plan and that map. We do have parcels out there that are island in some senses out there. I don't have the history on why they have been rezoned. I know there's kind of one out near Bronson. It was switched years ago, well before my time, through the rezone process. So there is an interpretation basis on if the commission and the Board of Supervisors would ultimately decide if a project would be feasible. In the zoning best practices that we go through, we tend to really focus in on aligning the stars with that map.
Thank you very much for that answer. And if I could just make one comment, if that's okay. That's the only thing in all of this. You know, we tried to, I'm not a big solar proponent, and so I don't want to be described as such, but on the other hand, for those who wanted, especially adjacent to an industrial area in the south where there are already lines, replacing some of what was lost with Neil, you know, try to address slope, CSR, saturation, private ownership, screening, and all of those things. Less than 0.5%. With the saturation level, I would have liked to have seen a little bit of opportunity, not all over the place, not out east. But I realize that's not the order of the day, and that's not what has ultimately carried as far as public sentiment. I can respect that, but I wanted to see if there was a very limited opportunity, and it doesn't look like there is. But thank you for exploring it.
Sure.
That's, you know, you bring up the future land use map, and you say, okay, only industrial land, but yet, you know, Sioux City says nothing within 2 miles, and then of course all the other industrial is within the city limits of other cities. We basically have just, by this, you're saying there's no solar in Woodbury County. So, I mean, essentially that's kind of what the comprehensive plan is saying too. So, I mean, at what point do you just ban wind or solar? I mean, just.
Well, again, the distinguishing factor that I think that we got from the public, and specifically the AP land, a lot of it was about protecting the AP land from that point of view. And I think that generally it's been about the level of acres, the level that it's been taken out. I think that many of the folks in the county haven't been so much anti-solar. They haven't been so much anti-solar in terms of the residential or the rights to have some facilitate the own property on the own land from that perspective. So I think it's an intensity issue that involves the change of lifestyle out there. So it's, I said before, one of the things are an interpretation of the word industrial that came up quite a bit. From a few of the developers that we heard of, they corrected us kind of. I know that they called into some of the meetings. I know either Tom Traharn from NextEra or somebody had pointed out, I have to be corrected if, go back and look, but one of them had made the statement about the industrial term, the intensity of the word industrial out there on ag land, where it was kind of in the rhetoric of the debate that we don't want industrial solar out on ag land is what came out quite a bit. And so it was kind of a tug of war on the title, because the ones that are developing and pushing for it are trying to put good effort in about coexistence, and the olive branches of coexistence end up in the agrivoltaics, the exploration of how this could possibly eventually coexist with agriculture. And we discussed everything from sheep grazing the land to different types of animals, et cetera. And so at the end of the day, it just was really about that distinguishing factor of the change of the landscape of the land. And so utility versus private were very much distinguished between the folks.
All right, well, let's receive the report and we can move to the public hearing, and then if the board wants to discuss during the reading and obviously approve or disapprove of it at that point. So I'll move to receive item 10G.
Second.
Second by Nelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. And of course, thank you to the zoning commission and the public for the 8 meetings to get to this point. This is what we just received. It's a lot of public input. We weren't going to read it to you guys because it would take all night, but we do want to highlight that we appreciate that volunteer service and everyone's time. All right, item 10H is our 4:45 p.m. set time. This is a public hearing to consider zoning ordinance text amendments for utility scale energy systems, conditional use in the general industrial zoning district, including to add a new section 5.08, amend the table of contents, and renumber the ordinance page numbers to accommodate the addition of the new section. The public hearing is now open. If you'd like to speak for or against approval of this reading, please come with your name and address, and you'll be limited to 3 minutes.
Hello, my name's Larry Philippi from Anthony, Iowa. It's probably the first time I spent 38 years working for the federal government. By the way, how much time do I have? Do I have just 3 minutes?
Yes.
No pun intended. I'm standing here, it's the first time that I'm happy that government moves as slow as what it does. Because when government moves slow on something new like this, it's like buying a new car. You don't want to buy a new car, let your neighbor buy the new car, and then you learn from it, right? So stuff was snuck in during COVID. We've had an opportunity. This is right in line with wind turbines. We're happen to be talking about solar panels today. I've heard a couple of things over here, and secondary roads, we got the report last week from Mark Namira, and I mean, I heard millions of dollars, right? Thousands of tons of gravel used on gravel roads, just to maintain our current state on how we operate. It wasn't meant for industrial use. And we all know when we talk about green energy, that means heavy cranes, heavy trucks, wear and tear on roads. And as a taxpayer, trust me, I pay enough taxes out in rural Woodbury County, okay? And anyways, enough of that. I took a few notes here. Solar's been around for over 140 years. 1883, the first rooftop unit was installed. If it was so great and so energy efficient, what are we doing? We haven't done anything with it today. The only reason we're talking about it is because landowners get money, government gets subsidies from taxpayers, and the rest of us get nothing. Not that I'm in it for the money, I could care less about money. We're talking about Woodbury County, and I think I heard the stat, we were the 3rd largest ag county in the state of Iowa, is that right? Address the chair. Is that right? I think that's what I heard said. I would like to see us 2nd or 1st, not 3rd. If we take more ag land out of production and we put solar fields there, what are we doing? And we haven't even talked about the battery contamination. We are so uneducated with this stuff, to include myself. So I hope government continues moving as slow as it does so we have an opportunity to learn from, hopefully, mistakes that we don't make into the future. And I can throw wind turbines in there as well. You know, the old saying goes, you can put lipstick on a pig and it's still a pig, right? Solar, farms, there's nothing farm about solar. We've heard it. It's an industrial operation. It deserves to be in industrialized zoned acres, period, dot. And I think that we need to preserve our ag ground because it is a valuable resource. Mid-American, I mentioned this the other day, they like to use conservative language. That's so, it's kind of like any salesman. You don't want to offend a prospective buyer, so you want to soften it, okay? We don't want to say industrial, because that's a pretty sharp word. But if we say farm, that's kind of softens the blow a little bit. It kind of sucks you in some. again, I'm glad government moves as slow as it does because it gives us an opportunity to get smarter, to get wiser, to do our own research, and hopefully starve some of this off. So back to what Mr. Namara said, our county engineer, we spend enough money on roads, gravel, maintenance. I just heard about all the equipment that we bought so we could spread that gravel. We're not even talking about labor, and now we want to tear the roads up. I don't think we want to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak during the public hearing?
Thank you. My name is Robert Wilson. I'm with Renewable Energy Equity Partners. Kind of here tonight on behalf of the 12 different households in Woodbury County that have decided to seek long-term renewable energy lease revenue for their families on the land that they own. Mr. Priestley mentioned a lot of things about a conditional use permit process that are really good, and they've really done a good job incorporating those. Like the setbacks, like the road use agreements. So, you know, an agreement whereby a developer is required to repair the roads and improve them after the project is constructed. We feel that the CUP process only to general industrial is too narrow in scope. And not only do you have 12 different households and more that are seeking this use for their property, but renewable energy projects like solar farms are a use that doesn't require the build out of industrial facilities like sewer, water, power, gas. So citing them in an industrial area, you're not utilizing the investment that the county and the city have already put in place, whereby an ag preservation district would be better suited because for 20 years or more, that ground is laying fallow, improving the soil quality, regeneration. At the end of the project's life, the project's decommissioned, and that soil can go back to an agriculture use. So that's why we feel that the scope that is being recommended is too narrow and it should be expanded to other districts as well. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak during the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll move the public hearing be closed.
Second.
Second by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item I is to approve the first reading of the ordinance. Is there any board discussion? Or further questions from Mr. Priestley?
Personally, I'd like to see us have some avenue for those that want to in the ag preservation area, whether it be an overlay or we determine a percentage of available farm ground. We spoke like 1 or 2%. What were we willing to give up? 1.1%? I don't know. We had numbers thrown around. I don't even remember how long ago now, 6 months ago. I just think after our discussion of future land use and, again, proximity to cities, I also think there's an impending issue coming up if Winnebago intends to pursue solar projects like the rumors are suggesting. Well, Winnebago has ground in our county as well, and I don't know if we really have that much control over tribal ground as far as the zoning. So, again, I think we're trying to make this a little too narrow and essentially eliminate solar projects in our county.
Mr. Priestley, could you give just a brief summary of what it means to approve this versus work with what we currently have?
Yes, the scope of the debate is been noticed at the ordinance at the general industrial level. And so we have to debate it within that scope of where the coverage is there. The ordinance itself does have the added feature to the existing process, but we do need to stay within the scope of how it was noticed as far as general industrial, which was based on the zoning commission recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion from the board?
I'd like to correct a statement that you said. There was 8 zoning meetings, but we also had 2 board hearings last fall as well. One of the things I find interesting are the parallels between what the zoning commission found through their 8 meetings and what Simcoe has found through all the work that they had done, especially when both those groups worked independently, but also had a lot of meetings that had a lot of the public there, and I had attended a few of those, and I know that you also receive phone calls and emails from folks across the county too. So I find that interesting that they mirror each other so close. I think between the two, you could say you've captured the sentiment of the county. To Keith's 2 questions, both of those items were covered in zoning meetings. They talked about, a percent, they talked about overlays. None of those were viable avenues, and I just want people to know that Supervisor Taylor and I, we read a lot of ordinances. I read a lot of ordinances from across the state. I sent stuff to Jeremy. We bounced, I don't know how many phone calls we had where we bounced a lot of things off each other before we sent a list or made a list that we brought here and gave direction to zoning. And then they worked with that list for 3-4 months? And the public interacted with that list for 3-4 months. So we put everything out there. So I have no problem with what the finding is. The slowness of government, Larry, was kind of a funny comment, but I think we did the right thing by allowing all those hearings and having all those people there, and I think we did the right thing by having all those options and laying out all the options. And I know, Dan, you've read, I don't know how many ordinances you've read personally, but I guess seeing what Simcoe has to say with their comp plan and what zoning has found, I think that it's pretty overwhelming on what the sentiment is going forward, and that can change. And that can change at any time. And so I would be supportive of what's presented here tonight.
I'll move to approve the first reading of the ordinance.
Second.
Second by Bittinger. Any further discussion? Mr. Taylor?
Just a legal question. I'll look down to your right, my left. So to Supervisor Raddig's earlier question, this is not as if we say, well, we want to see this tweak or this change. This is a reading whole cloth of the ordinance on a yay or nay from the board. Is that correct? And if there was some sort of dissension or it would be, and the majority didn't carry from the board, then it would come back before us in a different form. Is my understanding correct?
I think Dan tried to address that question. The way that the recommendation was from the zoning commission was for changes limited to general industrial. So the notice for the public hearing tonight and the changes to the ordinance are limited to changes affecting general industrial. So if the board wants to make changes to the ordinance as to general industrial, there are some tweaks that can be made. But I think that if you wanted the zoning commission to look at it again, or if you wanted to consider options outside of general industrial, your action would be to refer it back to the zoning commission.
But that's a whole nother operation than what we're looking at tonight. Tonight, what I hear you saying is tonight we're limited to what is being proposed as far as the tweaks to general industrial on decommissioning plans, road use, final say on the plan, and so on. Is that?
Right, based on the recommendation that came from zoning commission, you're limited to changes in general industrial.
Thank you very much. And that's why I'm going to be supportive tonight, because we're not looking at every other, this isn't a debate tonight on whether or not AP can have some sort of overlay. I do think, and I'm appreciative, Supervisor Nelson talked about all the different meetings and conversations. Decommissioning is an important part of this. If you're going to put things on the ground and affect land usage for years to come, road use is an important part of this. So for that reason, on that limited scope, I'm going to be supportive.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-1, Raddick opposed. Item 11 from Secondary Roads, County Engineer Mark Nera, for action includes A, receive bids for pavement markings 2024 and return them to the county engineer for review and recommendation.
First item for tonight is pavement marking contract. The first quote is from Iowa Plains Signing Incorporated. See if I've got I don't think I have a bid tabulation for this. We'll only look at the total tonight on this and see where we're at. Proper bid bond was included. Total bid price was $222,800. $222,800. Next is from Dakota Traffic Services of Lawton, Iowa. Bid bond was again included. Total bid price, $153,900. $153,900. The final bid is from Vogel Traffic Services of Orange City. Bid bond again was included. Total bid price, $119,480. I think I'm pretty safe in recommending award to Vogel Traffic Services for $119,800.
Second?
Motion on A to receive bids first.
Oh, yes, sorry about that.
Yep. Motion by Raddick, second by Nelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Second?
Thank you. Motion by Raddick, second by Nelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item C is approval of the final voucher for project Perrin 135 with Dixon Construction.
Dixon Construction completed work on this bridge for Woodbury County. I'm trying to think which one 135 was right now. I don't think I put that on the agenda, but regardless, we are in the process of closing out the file. This was a federal aid replacement dollars with state road use tax funds. 100% was paid by the state. DOT has completed their materials audit. We've completed our internal audit, and we recommend approval of the final voucher.
I'll second the motion by Raddick. Hearing no discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item D is approval of the final voucher for project Perrin 601 with Dixon Construction as well.
The Perrin 601 project was the bridge on the east side of Pearson. This was a project where city bridge funds were earned for the replacement of this structure. It's on what we would call 110th Street. Work was done in compliance with all the specifications. DOT has completed their audit. We completed our internal audit and recommend approval of the final voucher.
Second?
Motion by Raddick, second by Nelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item E is approval to accept the pickup truck quotes and return them to the county engineer for an award recommendation.
Okay.
I do have one more copy.
Thanks for being a team player, Jeremy.
I'm a middle child, and that's getting short.
First bid is from the Woodhouse Auto family. These two trucks are to replace the current foreman's trucks for districts 2 and 3. Total purchase price, $53,274. Trade-in for unit number 26, $9,000. 26 would be the Mobile foreman's truck. Net purchase price, $44,274. That was Woodhouse, yes. The second truck for number 37. 37 is one generation separated of foreman's trucks. It had been kept on as the equipment operator's use truck. It had a fuel tank in it. We used it for that purpose. So that one is also $53,274. Trade-in on that unit is $5,000. Net purchase price, $48,274. Both of these were for Ram 2500 trucks. There's a second bid from Woodhouse.
Do you also spec diesel or gas?
Gas for these. They're basically the 2500 size truck, so the 3/4 ton. We specify that they have passenger size doors, so it's the extended cab. Both Dodge and Chevy have that. This pushes forward to where they have to bid a crew cab to get that passenger style door. This next bid is for the Ford Super Duty. Purchase price with trade, $53,658. Trade-in on unit 26, $9,000. Net purchase price, $44,658. For the unit 37 trade, purchase price again, $53,658. Trade-in on unit 37, $5,000. Net purchase price, $48,658. The next bid is from Jensen of Lamar's, also of Sioux City. We require that they at least have a footprint in Sioux City with both Woodhouse and
Within the
Jensen
county.
have a, within the county, yes. Jensen is also bidding the Dodge 2500. Purchase price, $47,313. Trade-in on unit 26, $10,000. Net purchase price, $37,313 plus $179 dock fee. For unit number 37, purchase price, $47,313 again. Trade-in on unit 37, $7,000. Net purchase price, $40,313 plus $179 dock fee. Final bid on the pickups is from Kneffler Chevrolet. Kneffler submitted a bid for purchase price only. They note that in regards to trades, they did assign trade-in values. This is one of the things that we'll have to sort out in reviewing the bids. Purchase price for the first Chevrolet is $51,727, less a couple of rebates. Net total price $50,006. That's for a 2025 crew cab. They also bid the double cab or extended cab at $48,387. The trade-in values for the 2017 Chevy, they offer $12,000. The 2013 Ford F-150, $7,000. And it appears as those fully apply, but I do need to ask the salesman a couple of questions based on what he submitted here. I recommend that the board receive the bids for the 3/4 ton pickups and allow the county engineer to review them and come back with a recommendation.
How many miles are on the Chevy and the Ford that you're looking to get rid of, do you know?
The number 26 has, I think at last count, about 169,000 miles on it. The other truck, I think, was about 120,000, the older Ford. But again, for about the last 4 years, it's been used in a more of an auxiliary role as opposed to full-time with a foreman.
Would you consider like a Gov Deals or something auctioning these? Because I feel like
That's
the value.
something we were planning to do with the pickup truck for District 5 that we purchased last year. And as it turned out, we had one of our pickup trucks totaled, so we kept it.
I remember that, yeah.
It was kind of a good deal that we still had it in the fleet. Auction is something we would definitely look at, and that would be one of the things I'll be reviewing in the next week, is to kind of take a look at auction prices on similar vehicles before I make a recommendation on trade.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I'll move the item.
Second?
Second by Bittinger. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item F is approval to accept the dump truck quotes and return them to the county engineer for an award recommendation.
Now, some of these are in the same envelope. The second bid sheet's for the single axle dump truck. So the first bid sheet I handed out was for the camper. This is going to be a bit of a mixed bag because we did have a couple of the dealers put both bids in the same envelope. others are in separate. So I'll try and make sure I keep you informed as to which way we're going as we go through each one. The first bids are from Tech Equipment of Sioux City. They're the Volvo dealer in town.
And this is for what truck number?
This is tandem and single axle are both included.
Okay.
I'll be reading the single first, it looks like.
Is it truck 503 that you're looking to trade, or 203 for this one, or both?
503 is going, hang on a second, I don't think it's, is it? Yeah, it's 503 is going to be replaced with a single axle. Yes, this is for trade-in truck number 503. So this trade is single axle for single axle. Purchase price of truck and equipment, all of our plow, tailgate spreader, and the related equipment is all included with this package. Purchase price of truck and equipment, $217,467. $217,467. Trade-in on unit 503, $25,000. Net purchase price, $192,467. Truck number 203 is being traded toward a tandem truck. So what we're trying to do is get 2 tandems in each district, or 3 tandems in each district, and 2 single axles. This will bring the District 2 to that level of trucks. Purchase price for the truck and equipment for the replacement for 203, $261,632. Trade-in on vehicle number 203 is $21,000. Net purchase price with trade, $240,632.
What company was that one?
Tech Equipment, that's the Volvo dealer. They've recently changed their name. I don't think that's what it used to be called there, but this is the first time they bid for us in several years, so we'll have to see how their spec stacks up.
What kind of a suspension system on these trucks that you priced?
They're either Henderson leaf spring rear end on the single axles. The other is the, I want to say it's the Henderson Max 8 suspension, which is a partial airbag suspension. It's not fully a leaf spring suspension that we put on it. I've been concerned about using an all airbag suspension, especially since our guys do get off-road from time to time. Those bags do get torn. The Max 8, as I think it's called, is a hybrid with springs and some airbags in it, and it seems to be a pretty good suspension on that tandem. We haven't had any problems with the 2 that we have already. We made that switch over 5-6 years ago before we switched over to buying single axles. At this time, International is sharing that they can only get single axle trucks, so they are bidding 2 single axles. We've heard a lot of concerns about supply side issues. The Allison transmission we typically spec on the tandem trucks, they're already at 40% oversold for this current model year. Until I read through and see what each of the bidders have, we may be 18 months out on the tandem, is conservatively what I'm hearing. International asked if they could just bid 2 singles. I said, sure, you know, we're buying singles right now, so, or we're replacing single axles right now, so. It gives them something that we can take a look at and come back with a recommendation. I just need to find where they put their quote. Each of the dealers, I think, has been doing their best to come up with the replacements on the tandems. It's difficult for them to bid this year because of the issues on the supply side. We were offered a different style of transmission that I told them they could go ahead and bid. It was a different brand. In doing some research, I'm not sure it's going to be suitable for the snowplow application. We'd probably be better off waiting the 18 months for the Allison to get here. But again, that's something we'll judge as we go through this. They make it difficult for me when they don't put it on our quote sheet. Very back page. Their bid price is $210,676. $7,500 trade for unit 503. Net purchase price $203,176. So that's single axle for single axle. I'm just going to take a guess that the other one would be the same price, but I'll have to dig through and see if we can find a trade-in value on 203. So $210,676 purchase price, trade on 503, $7,500. Total purchase price $203,176. Next bid is from iState, and they're quoting 2 tandem trucks. They're giving us 3 alternatives on tandem trucks. Whoops. Did anybody see where that flew? Thanks, Chris.
See, when you get close to retirement, you can start throwing things around.
That's right, beating up all the equipment before I walk out the door. Tandem truck bid from iState, $275,059. Trade-in on number 203, $5,000. Net purchase price with trade, $270,059. And that's a bid on a Western Star truck. Next bid also on the tandem. This time I know where to find my quote sheet. At least they're consistent. This is the trade, again on 203, $267,933. Trade-in on unit 203, $5,000. Net purchase price with trade, $262,933. This is also on a Western Star. This has the Detroit DT12 transmission on it, which is the alternate transmission. Another bid from iState. Oh, this is just strictly information on that new transmission for my review. Next is the single axle dump truck from iState. Rudy didn't put it in the same place this time. There it is. I guess he did. It was just stuck to the other one. Single axle dump truck, trading 503, $222,061. 222,061, sorry. 222,061. $6,000 trade for unit 503. $216,061 net value with trade. This is also for a Western Star single axle. Also bid on a Western Star, and again, we'll have to take a look and see what the differences are here. $215,126, $6,000 trade-in value, net purchase price $209,126. Oh, I see what the difference is now with the 4 bids submitted by iState. A couple of them are being built by Highway, and a couple are being built, I think, by Stefan Trucks. So we have 2 different body and frame builders is why they submitted the bids that they submitted. I just want to make sure I haven't left anything on the floor. That appears to be all of the bids. I recommend the board move to receive the bids and return them to the county engineer for review.
I'll second the motion by Radig. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you all for your patience. We have to do it this way.
Yep.
Item G is approve the contract for project number CP 2024, CMP Culvert Supply for 2024 with Metal Culverts Incorporated for $105,657.80.
We took bids a couple of weeks ago on metal culverts. This includes our regular stock for driveway construction and 2 special order projects for replacement of damaged structures going across the road. I recommend approval of the contract.
Move it.
Second the motion by Radig. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you. Next is item 12 from the Board of Supervisors. Mr. Taylor, this is for information, approval to reallocate funding on cost of insurance from the new LEC maintenance and repair budget and/or schedule a closed session to consider the county's provision on long-standing and necessary lease provision issues. I'll let you introduce him, Mr. Taylor, and then the board will discuss. And since part of this discussion involves the contract with the LAC Authority on the lease, I'd also willingly recognize members of the authority that have attended today, and then, of course, the public. So go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So for several months, the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors has known that there are provisions of the lease between the Law Enforcement Center and the Board of Supervisors that are problematic. I think with patience, we've tried to work to see that maybe this would be after the Law Enforcement Center was open, but with that being delayed yet again, it's time that the board moved off of dead center and helped to bring this up. These include a lack of parameters on the thresholds by which the county or the LAC Authority Maintenance Fund will operate, a lack of clarity on functional ownership, a prohibition on the LAC Authority building new buildings from the maintenance fund, and safeguards and oversight on taxpayer dollars by the county board, from which we have heard from our public many a time. So this agenda item contemplates a couple of items. First, we learned of a currently unbudgeted $177,000 of expense for insurance annually. This is something we learned about in the media, for those of us who don't sit on the Law Enforcement Center Authority. I looked at the lease and I consulted with Joshua, and it's clear the county owes this money. So it owes $177,000 to the authority. Section 13.2 makes that clear. The problem is we don't have that money budgeted for FY25. In the Law Enforcement Center's maintenance fund, and I want to be clear, these are tax dollars. We will have accumulated $1.2 million by May 1st. That's money that you have been taxed for over the last 3 years at the tune of $400,000 every year. And now that we have the earliest potential date of July 2024, I believe we should take a second look at the money that we allocated in the FY25 budget for repairs that the county is, in my estimation, voluntarily allocating over and above any maintenance funds of about $170,000. And I believe we should stand on the legal opinion that those maintenance costs are to be paid by the owner, not the tenant. I don't know of any situation in which a tenant replaces a roof on a house in town for which he or she is renting. And it seems reasonable to reallocate the additional county-provided maintenance funds of, again, $170,000 for this unbudgeted $177,000 expense. And then secondly, if this action does not carry in, I made this informational for tonight because I think it's a good two-part step to process, and Dennis Butler, our budget analyst, couldn't be here. If it doesn't carry, then I would ask, when is the Board of Supervisors going to take up this issue? I do not think it's wise to wait till the building opens, as I've heard time and time again. Well, we need to just get the building open. I believe that puts our building services superintendent in a tenuous spot if there is a repair that's needed for which there's a gray area and dissension between the Board of Supervisors and the LAC Authority. So just for background information, the Law Enforcement Center has exceeded $70 million. This is an $8 million expense over 20 years' time, so that takes us up to $78 million. If we don't take action over the next 20 years, we're going to dedicate $3.4 million more in repair maintenance expense. Add to that we just found out we have $1.6 million more in insurance than is previously allocated for the current building, and this building is around $83 to $85 million. And my point is to dedicate $3.4 million more of that $83 to $85 million. I think the public is at enough already. So what we do is really important because I discussed this with Joshua. We will set a precedence for years to come if the county voluntarily allocates another $170,000 in repairs. And so try to be patient in this, let the process roll. I was asked, and I think we were all asked, on that $170,000, here's a list of things that are operational versus maintenance. So filled that out, handed that back, haven't heard anything. Don't know if that was an exercise in futility or if it's something that we're going to take up. Then we were asked by outside legal counsel who we've been paying. I think each of us were asked for our opinions on what we would put forward as lease provisions. I don't know that anybody returned anything to John Templer. So I think it's important for the taxpayers that we reallocate that $170,000 in the county maintenance repairs that we had originally allocated in FY25. And if not, then we schedule, and this may not be permissible, either an open or a closed session to discuss the terms of the lease and the many different problems. I mentioned the new buildings prohibition, functional ownership, the maintenance funds allocation, but I believe that we can stand again on the precedence that the owner is responsible for the repairs. After all, we've given them $1.2 million of taxpayer money and $170,000, which I don't even think in a brand-new building that we are going to realize is not unreasonable. I was appreciative of Supervisor Nelson, who asked the LEC authority and was not successful in his petition to cover those costs in this first year. That was rebuffed. But I want to have this discussion because I think we're waiting far too long to have it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Those are my opening comments.
Just to clarify, your proposal to pay for the $170,000 is from what source?
So for the source that the county for FY25 is currently allocated to maintenance, repairs, that $170,000 that in the budget process that we approved, I believe should be reallocated to the insurance expense that we currently have unbudgeted.
So the county would still pay?
Yeah, so the county still, it's clear the lease says the county is still responsible for the insurance payment. What I'm suggesting is that the county is not responsible for maintenance outside of the maintenance fund that it's already, we're doubly taxing people. And I think it's high time the public's aware of it.
Okay. Comments?
Well, I've been reading through the lease quite a bit since I saw this on the agenda. And then also talked with Joshua and, you know, what was Aller's say in this, what was Jody's say in this? And they say everything kind of falls back to the lease. Look at the lease. So you look at the lease. So the county's responsible only in certain instances. That's when damage is caused by the county and inmates, invitees, visitors, agents, or maintenance contractors of the county. So pretty much everything else is covered by the landlord in the situation. And that is why we're paying the $400,000 a year to the maintenance fund. It's to pay for the maintenance on the building. So technically anything above and beyond that should not be the county's responsibility unless there is an accidental damage case caused by county employees or inmates. So obviously there will be some of those probably, you know, you'll have people trying to damage the showers or bathrooms or whatever in the inmates' quarters. So having a little bit set aside for that makes sense. But obviously most of the scenarios, seems like HVAC filter replacements, all that falls on the landlord in the lease. So if we go back to the lease, the county should not probably be levying an additional 177 unless we expect about 177 in damage by employees and inmates, which I don't know if office pops are a real thing or not, or if that's just in the movies. But it looks like, you know, our actual exposure in an annual budget shouldn't be more than what the maintenance fund already is. So that's my opinion from the lease.
And I would just read from the lease, the county agrees that it will make all repairs not required by the authority, and I think that's the section that you're referencing, Keith.
Yeah, I'm in 12.1B.
Comments?
Well, a few things. The first thing is the closed session, that's out of order, because that would put the body in conflict with the Constitution and Chapter Code of Iowa, so we can't go into closed session. So that's off the books completely. That'd be a violation, I believe, of the law, and even bringing that up would be completely out of order for that. So that's the first thing.
To that point, can we just ask our legal counsel?
Sure.
And the reason is your
Right.
outside legal counsel had brought it up, just so you know that the counsel that we've engaged
That's
asked.
fine, but
And I
still-
want to rely on legal counsel too. In fact, I would rather have it in open session, so that the public can hear what's, being bandied about. But Joshua, it sounded like you had some reservation about doing something like that in closed session, so if that's okay.
that's fine, but still.
Yeah, I'm not aware of an exception that would allow for the board to discuss how it wants to change the lease in closed session. You're right that outside counsel had alluded to that previously, and I did send a follow-up email to him. I have not heard anything further as far as how he feels that it might be able to be a closed session, but like I said, as I sit here, I'm not aware of an exception that would allow it.
I don't see why that needed to be brought up. That's not the greatest reflection on our legal counsel. I mean, the code is, in this instance, is like one page,
One page.
and it's pretty clear that there's no exception for this, for just discussing something we don't want to have heard by the public. So certainly if this was to be discussed, I would think an open session would be more appropriate. And I don't think a closed session would be allowed. And you were saying?
Well,
Mr. Bittinger?
it seems to, insurance costs versus maintenance account, it seems like there's two different expenses underneath section 7.2 additional rent. I think from the reading of the lease, it seems like those are two different things.
I agree.
I don't think insurance would be considered a maintenance fund expense or maintenance repair. That'd be two different.
And I agree, and I'm not suggesting, just to clarify, I'm
Okay,
not
sorry.
suggesting that the maintenance fund pay for the insurance.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm conceding we have to pay for that.
Right.
What we don't have to pay for is $170,000 more in maintenance funds, as Keith alluded to
Okay.
and the lease specifies.
All right.
Meaning, sorry, just clarification, meaning you would want to reduce the maintenance fund
Right.
allocation by 170,000?
No, meaning the
Kenny's
extra,
budget.
yeah,
Building
meaning the extra that the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors voluntarily allocated outside of the maintenance fund. In other words, we have the $1.2 million of taxpayer money sitting there right now. And then we said, here's another $170,000 by which Kenny could start to annually use from taxpayers and let that just grow to 8 million unencumbered.
So, again, in reading the lease, anything damage-wise caused by county employees or inmates is our expense. So year one, throwing 177 out there may be a good idea, but maybe year two, you keep that set aside in a fund if you're not gonna expend that. If we actually have that per year, 177 in damages, that's potential, but, you got somebody throws a metal pot in the microwave, blows it up, well, that's now negligence, and that's the county's expense, according to the lease. The other side of it too, it says if we decide to make any redecorating, remodeling, alterations, or painting, that's the county's expense. But year one, we shouldn't be remodeling the place or repainting the offices. So, to me, you got your 400,000 you've set aside, 3 years now, you're gonna have 1.2 million. We do need to have some funds obviously set aside for, county error, damage by inmates, whatever, because that will potentially happen. But, we don't need to be in the habit of setting aside 177 or whatever it was per year if year one it comes in and there's only 20 grand worth of damages. So I think year one is gonna be a real telltale of, what to actually expect, with a full year of operations with inmates, with sheriff deputy staff, with the attorney's office, which I don't imagine them breaking too much stuff, but you never know.
You're really concerned about inmates breaking stuff?
Well, that's the only thing specified in the lease that the county's responsible for, so it should be our concern, I guess, because that's what we're supposed to pay for. The maintenance fund is supposed to pay for everything else. And the
Well,
mayor did
We're
stop.
on the hook for what you just said either way. I
Yeah.
mean, currently and into the future, and if we, worst case, open past, the beginning of the next fiscal year, then the new LAC's budget's going to have to fund what we're doing right now. Otherwise, we won't have a jail that's funded, so. Mark?
I think we have to remember that at the end of the day, it's all county money, right? It's just that we've handed it over to this body that's looking over a chunk of it as the construction goes on and then with the future maintenance. My fear has always been that if building services isn't properly funded, we may not be able to make the timely repairs that needs to be done if there's a disagreement, an argument back and forth between the two, while there's something that's not functional that needs to be replaced. And so that's always been my concern, was on the behalf of that department. I think the other thing that's really hard here is that while we know what some of the operational costs were of our current facility, we're as much planning and stuff as we've done in the new one, we're still kind of in the dark as to what's gonna break, who's gonna break what it's gonna cost. And so, to me, I think that going into this first year to try to be as extremely tight-pennied and conservative, I don't know what good that does if halfway through the year we gotta go back and reallocate a bunch of money out of reserves because we're learning through this process. And I agree with Keith just a minute ago. He goes, I think you just said that after this year, we're going to know a lot better what some of our costs and repairs and the stuff are gonna be. And I think we could totally adjust stuff in this next year, hopefully downward and not upward, but it could be upward. And so I believe that the maintenance fund was set up for a lot of those big ticket repairs. When you see was that you that was with me when we were up in the air handlers and the boxes of air filters?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. So again, we're really wading into the unknown with this facility, and I know it's trying, and I know that it's a hard thing, but I really think that we just kind of have to have cushion, and it's unfortunate that the 177 wasn't budgeted. Obviously, I agree, it's in the lease, it explicitly says we have to pay it. We can pay it quarterly,
I was gonna say, right, quarterly.
but Dennis wasn't too concerned as far as, those funds coming out of reserves, but I just think that, in that regard, that we just kind of leave well enough alone. We've done a lot of planning, and I think we gotta get it open, get in there, and just operate it, and then we'll have a much better idea of where we're at. And then as far as, provisions to the lease, a lot of this I agree with. I think it comes down to, again, we had a discussion tonight about how hard it is for Shane and Ron and Jody to respond to media questions on a day-to-day basis. And Ron's not paid for this. And so it is a time-sucking son of a gun that's been going on. And it's just something else that, and I don't know where my fellow commissioners are on the authority on these items, Jeremy. I don't think they're probably too far off, but I can't speak for them. But again, it's just something else thrown on the plate that it's hard to find time for some of the little stuff, let alone something like this. Now, we could definitely get together and talk about, and you've started this tonight with ideas, and I think a lot of us are very agreeable to some of this, and there may be a few more things that we'd all like to see. But that's my 2 cents on this item, I guess.
Could I respond?
Sure.
So I completely 100% agree with you that we don't want a situation where there's something that has to be repaired and there's this unclear, should I repair it or should I not? So I'm just going to ask you a question if that's okay. Is that all right? So I have a 23,000, August 1st, or let's say the facility's opened. There's a $23,381 item that needs to be repaired. Should Kenny repair that or not? I mean, that's a real question that I don't want, we have 24 hours, we've got inmates, we have people who need to be protected that are in law enforcement. Is that something that he should go
Well,
ahead
if
and
the
take
inmates
care of?
broke it in the jail, then that'd be on us.
Yeah, absolutely. What if inmates didn't break it and it's related to a freak drive on an air handler? Is that something that he should replace in the next 24 hours in order to make ASHRAE standards for heating or cooling?
I think so.
How about if it's 26,000?
I think so.
So that's my point. That contradicts what the chairman says should be done. And the reason is that the chairman put out a memo 4 days after you asked for the law enforcement center to fund all repairs in that first year
Sorry, which chairman?
of the LAC Authority,
Yeah.
put out a maintenance fund statement. And it's, in my opinion, it's a violation of the lease. And when you say big ticket items, that's a violation of the lease. There is nothing in the lease, and it also specifies there's no oral agreements that supersede it. And it says a maintenance repair expenditure of $25,000 or greater, the authority pays from the authority's maintenance fund. Did the LAC Authority vote on that?
No, that was just a memo that he read at a meeting and just relayed his thoughts. That does not mean that I agree with it or that.
Then it
Commissioner
shouldn't be
Moore-
on the LAC Authority's website. It's not legally binding. It shouldn't be something that's put out as a definitive statement.
Well,
And the big ticket item isn't even in the lease. The way the lease reads right now is what Keith said, the authority is responsible. And the reason I guess I have heartburn over this is that we just brought up a scenario in which Kenny was going to pay for something over $25,000 from this extra 170. And we don't even know, and we can't even give him direction on what he's supposed to repair and not. That's my worry about kind of figuratively kicking this can down the road, is that this, to me, will violate the lease. And I don't want to see you guys, and we're appreciative of all the information you're bringing back, which has been great. But right now, there is no cushion by having to pay this extra $170,000 or $77,000, and we have $1.2 million in cushion. So I want to see the authority not get into legal trouble. I think putting out a statement that this is what the authority will or will not do without a vote on it even, I think
well, in what context, I guess, is it on the website?
it's published as one of the documents. It's maintenance fund statement in line with lease provisions, contracts, and other legally binding statements.
Because the only reason I say that is because it was entered into the record, so it would have to be on the website, at least in the minutes, because it was part of a meeting. But I guess if it's portrayed that it's an official document, no, it was never
Yeah, it's
voted
it's
on.
on your letterhead, and it says a maintenance repair expenditure of $25,000 or greater, authority pays from the authority's maintenance fund. One item for the repairs in the LAC. I mean,
Yeah, that was an informational item that Chairman Wick brought forward that was not voted on, but was entered into the record so I mean, it has to be on the website because it's part of the minutes. It was part of that meeting, Jeremy.
okay. It just sounds pretty definitive that that's the position of the LAC authority. And right now, I'm just troubled that we don't even know the direction for one of our employees on whether he should fix something even over that threshold or not from county additional allocated funds. So those are my concerns.
I guess Ron Wick, I mean, so like today, for example, Chairman Wick typed up a media guide that he proposed that was voted down, and that will have to be on the minutes as well, on the website. That doesn't mean that was the stance that we took or that that's the official word of the authority, just as much as if someone read your summary today and said that this is the board's stance on all these items. So I guess I'm not trying to argue, I just don't understand that because he typed something up and read it at a meeting and entered it in the record that that's the law when it's not. I guess I've never portrayed that to anybody on this body or anybody in the public, so I feel that's an unfair statement.
Yeah, and I just respectfully disagree. If you put it out on a list of documents with everything else that's legally binding and it's not in your minutes.
Yeah, I would agree that
that's
it
the way
should not
it's
be in that
portrayed.
spot, but
Yeah,
I don't know that, Ron, did you put that Mr. Chairman Wick, did you put that on the website, that, in that spot? So
Okay,
it
so
could,
then that should probably be removed, Karen. Sounds like that's a request that they have that removed from all their other legal documents, because right now it reads that that's what the authority's stance is. And I've heard that before. Dennis said, well, the authority's not gonna pay for anything under 25,000. That's not in the lease.
that's correct, yeah.
And so that's the point, is you can't just say, this is what we're gonna do. These are legally binding documents, and I worry if the board chooses to double tax people, and it says, here's 177,000 more, that's your choice. You'll set that precedent of adding 3.4 million more, but you're going to be taking care of expenses that are part of a maintenance fund you've already taxed people for. And I think from our, what I'd like to think of our background of the taxed enough already conservative bent would be that we wouldn't want to do that.
What are examples of big ticket items that you believe the LAC maintenance fund should pay for?
Loss of an air handler, a freak drive going out, inability of an actuator to be able to control certain temperatures and spaces, a boiler, a chiller system, window repairs, anything down to $10 that is not caused by damage from one of the inmates or the employees, which is what the lease says. So I never use the term big ticket because the lease doesn't. The lease simply says that the LAC authority has a maintenance fund that we fund and that's responsible for the maintenance. The 25,000 or big ticket items, those are all oral additions that the lease prohibits.
Would a more fair characterization or word be unforeseen?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, that's where having a discussion where you're actually saying, okay, what does the lease mean by all this, you know? So, I mean, so you make the claim all maintenance is paid through the maintenance fund. Well, is mopping maintenance, or is mopping cleaning up after county employees walk through the building? So I think it's one of those things where, are we gonna discuss what defines what is maintenance and what is not? What is this 400,000 per year actually used for? Because by the lease, it's pretty much everything except damage caused by us or inmates.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, in fairness to the LAC authority, and I think we've had this discussion as well, it's not operational. So I'm not suggesting electricity, natural gas, water, cleaning, those sort of things. But when we put out $60,000 in HVAC repairs, I mean, that sort of item clearly is a responsibility, of the LAC authority. I just don't want to see us going to taxpayers more than, especially now that we have this other thing that needs to be paid for, because you all are going to have to deal with the reserves issue next year, so.
That is correct. I don't think a lease needs to be exhaustive. Leases are not designed to be an exhaustive list of what is to be covered. I think if we look at this retrospect, not to criticize the supervisors, but you signed the lease, and that should have been examined then. And so some of this is our own roosters coming home because of that. And not shading anyone prior up here, you guys up here, but this is part of the predicament of not, I think, examining that lease in full scale and detail. And so with that, I think it's a little hard to bring heat or bear down on this one thing, this one extra, unforeseen expense. I'm not in favor of doing anything with the lease right now. I think we need to have full attention bandwidth to get the thing open. I think the imperative is relationship, because out of relationship, that will lead to what we're going to spend things on and how we're going to communicate with the LAC. And out of relationship, we can, I think, mitigate your concerns, Supervisor Taylor. Now, one would say, well, it's not in writing, it's not, you don't have any contract at least, so they could still do what they want. But I think now that with having Supervisor Nelson on the board, we have seen the greater involvement in communication, and I think it's the LEC's intent to work with the supervisors. Because this last year, we have seen greater involvement in communications, and I think, once again, that reflection of supervisors over the last 4 years prior to my term, not condemning anyone or saying anything was done wrong. It's just there needed to be greater involvement, greater interaction from both parties, and that's on the LEC as well, and not just solely on the supervisor. So I understand the concern about taxing that. There's a 1.2 million there, but I understand the concern not to tax, and we want to have reserves, but we're going to be all right. And I think this could be inflaming relationships versus bringing people into the discussion potentially. And so, but I don't fault you for bringing this up. It's a concern, right? It has to be addressed. It needs to be addressed. We will address the lease, but I think it needs to be after.
So you anticipate after the building opens, you would like to address it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so just,
ahead.
I realize that 3 of us weren't on the board when the lease was signed. But my concern is those of us who are right now that are doing something to the lease that's not allowable. Actually violating the lease or going up. So it's not the lease as written, and you can ask legal counsel if there's a $25,000 mandate. There's not.
Right now, there's not in there.
So
your point's
the
up there.
imperative is not
Point's there.
relationship, it's holding to the fidelity of both what's legal and the relationship with the people that we're called to represent, the taxpayers. And I believe if you listen to the tone and tenor of the community, it's not in our favor right now. And I don't think it's in our favor if we tell them, we're going to double tax you. It absolutely is. You can characterize or say it'll all be all right, don't worry about it. It's not unless the actions of this board hold to what we promised people. We did not promise an $85 million building. We didn't promise them that we were going to, we didn't even say that in the beginning, that there's a $400,000 maintenance fund annually and you're gonna pay $8 million. But then on top of that, to add insult to injury, salt in the wound, we're gonna tax you another $170,000. And we're gonna say that it holds to a lease, and it doesn't. So to me, I know we all wanna get along, and I appreciate that.
Oh, I'm not worried about
But
getting
not
along.
to the detriment or the degradation of those that we're called to represent. And I don't
Understand
think that we are. I would like to bring this back next week, and I just like a vote on it. I've tried to work behind the scenes. I asked in February, can we do this? No, wait, they're not going to engage. Got it. Now that the building's not gonna be open for now, I just want to vote, and I'm okay. I've been on the losing end of it before.
But
That's
what's the
okay.
point of the vote? Is it to make a point?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if you want to vote $170,000 extra and set that precedent, which will legally define this lease, because I think if you ask, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you ask what the board does this year is going to impact on an interpretation of the lease, yeah, absolutely. And if, again, if I'm on the losing end of it, that's fine. But I really believe it's the right thing to do, and I hope others will too.
I mean, just for some lease history, the lease was signed initially November 12th of 2020.
Right.
And then we've gone through 2 amendments. The last amendment, February 17th to 23, so just last year. And that's where we doubled what was going into the maintenance fund. Because originally, the original
Right.
lease had 200,000
Right. Yep.
per annum. In 23, we made it 400,000, so we added another 200,000. Also in that agreement, it said no oral amendment or modification, no amendment or modification of the second amendment shall be valid or binding unless in writing and executed by the party to be bound. So really, the lease stands as it is, and we just need, I think, clarification. I don't know that there's a vote necessarily that is gonna clarify it, but I think we really gotta figure out, and maybe Kenny would be the kind of guy that would love that challenge of figuring out what those are. I don't wanna task you with that in a week or anything, but,
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. It needs to be addressed. We need clarification, 100%. 100%. We don't want to tax people more. We want to be fiscally conservative, and the board has shown that. So I'm there on that point.
And I
and I'll
would like
dis-
to say, in terms of not just the lease, but this board does have a decision to make, and maybe status quo is okay, the $170,000 in repairs and maintenance that we're going to allocate additionally to the 1.2 million, which will, by the way, be 1.4 million come September 1st. If that's what the board wants to do, but that board does have that decision. And so I don't want anyone in the public to not recognize that the board, if the board goes through April and goes to the public hearing and says, no, we want to have that in there, add 3.4 million. It's exactly what will happen over the next 20 years to that 170,000. And it will be, there will be an $8 million fund set someday. And again, it's their money. It's not ours.
Well, first of all, we're not trying to keep the status quo, so I'll disagree with that. But we don't need to argue the merits of that. But I'll just say that. Go ahead, Matthew. Yeah.
Well, if anything breaks, it might not be 8 million at any given time. I mean, sometimes I wish the board and the authority had never amended the lease, simply because the issues the public has, a lot of them are related to the board's communication of what this $400,000 is there for. The board and the authority amended the lease in that fashion because, and I've brought this up before, and it gets buried in another way of describing it, but the reason was because the commitment we made to the people was that the bond for the construction would be paid by the federal revenue. And initially the income was, the first dollar was split between the LEC maintenance fund and the county. And the concern was, if we don't get what we hope, then the county it may be harder for the county to make that bond payment from the income from the federal revenue. So the compromise was to give the LEC authority a stable funding source, which is essential because the number, whether or not we agree or disagree with it, we don't know for a fact what's going to break over 20 years. But we do know that there was a reason for that number that was presented publicly and several times. And to say that it's double taxation is contributing to the issues people have with the project, when maybe it would have been better just to, even though it'd be worse for the county, maybe it'd be better for our own political image to just go with the original version, which would have been worse for the county and not agreeable, by both parties. This is something where what I'm hearing from the public is the pessimism of the project is based upon the issues the current jail faces. And one of the biggest issues the current jail faces is a lack of a maintenance fund. And you can say maintenance, you can say whatever sort of fund. A fund that's there to fund the massive expenses that come from operating a facility that has 500 beds. And this is something that we can't just dedicate a little bit here, a little bit there, rely on future boards to make sure it's okay. The fact that we're in collaboration with the LC authority says there's some give and take, and there was an agreement, and it does take two to tango. So if we're told they're not going to look at the lease until it's built, maybe that's what it means. And maybe just bringing it up again and again is just reason for them to say no again and again, and for the public to be confused and reconfused and upset again that we're, quote, taxing, which, yes, we are, for these funds, without the context of why. Why are we taxing? It's because we are funding consistently a maintenance fund that we don't currently have, and we are receiving the first dollar benefit of federal revenue so that we can keep the commitment to the taxpayers, which I think is an even greater commitment, that if we build this facility, if it's paid over 20 years by federal income, And we're not going back to property tax dollars because of other ways we've offset the budgeting process in the last several years. It's bad news that it goes from 50 to 60 to 70 to 80 million. But if it's paid for by federal revenue, isn't that still a community win? When we don't have to deal with the issues of the current jail that were guaranteed to us? I think it is. And with that, because it does take two to tango, I think we've discussed enough to allow if the LEC authority members would like to make comment. You're welcome.
Good evening. Dan Moore, 501 Pierce Street, Suite 300, Sioux City, Iowa. I'm a proud member of the Woodbury County Law Enforcement Center Authority. I just want to give you some background on how we got to where we are, because Chairman Young, thank you for your comments. I think you were spot on most of them. Iowa Code Section 346.27 authorizes an authority to have control of joint property. We have a 3-member board. 1 member is elected by the Board of Supervisors, and we're lucky to have Supervisor Nelson on the board. The second one is elected by the City Council. The City Council has elected me. Originally, Mayor Bob Scott was on the authority board, and Bob Scott asked me if I would like to take over, and I said, sure. The 3rd member is elected by the joint action of the Board of Supervisors and the City Council. The authority does have, which is Ron Wick, yeah. The authority does have, it's a separate entity. Its articles of incorporation were dated December 23, 2019, and bylaws were adopted January 13, 2020. On behalf of the city, so I'm the city representative on the authority board, and on behalf of the city, I want to point out, because this is really critical to have a maintenance fund for this reason. The city agreed, in large part, to join with the county, provided a maintenance fund be established so that years in the future, the LEC could be maintained and not gradually fall into disrepair or become a heavy burden to taxpayers. The establishment of a maintenance fund would have been a deal breaker. That's in my opinion. I don't think the city would be agreeable to do a joint venture with the county if we didn't have the maintenance fund. The maintenance fund is vital to the overall success of the project. When Mayor Bob Scott asked me if I wanted to serve on the authority, and originally when we were talking, he said, make sure we have a maintenance fund. A maintenance fund is why we're building, why we have the issue of a new law enforcement center, because the other one is in disrepair and needs millions of dollars to bring it back up to where it should be. It's been neglected. That's not to be critical on past boards of supervisors. It's just been neglected, and we don't want that to happen again. We don't want history to repeat itself. The lease agreement was entered into September 1, 2020. The amended and substituted lease agreement was entered into November 17, 2021. The second amendment to the lease agreement, as was pointed out, was entered into February 17, 2023. The lease is for a 20-year term commencing on November 17, 2021, and there's an option to extend the lease term for 2 consecutive periods of 10 years each. The building and property, the property's 38 acres approximately, they are owned by the authority. The authority leases the facility, the building and property, to the county. When the lease and the amended and substituted lease was entered into, section 7.2, and this is in the second amendment, talked about the additional rent. $200,000 per semi-annual payment was to be paid beginning November 1, 2021. I don't think we started the building in 2021. I'd have to fact check that one, but that was a covenant. That was a promise made by the county to make that semi-annual payment, $200,000, by the Board of Supervisors at the time that had public notice and had public discussion on that item. Section 7.3, the maintenance payments, $8,000 has or $8 million has a cap. And this is where Chairman Ung really nailed it. The $8 million is going to be built up over time, but it doesn't mean that the $8 million won't be used for maintenance items that we're having. We've had several discussions between the authority and with Kenny Schmitz. And I want to tell you, don't lose this guy because I trust him. I trust Kenny as an authority member, and I need that because this is a team effort. It started out as a team effort when we joined the city joined the county so that we wouldn't have to worry about whether we get 60% of the vote or do we get 50% of the vote. But Kenny, and it's a team effort. If we're in this together, Kenny, we've had several discussions with you. Yes, Supervisor Taylor, we talked about what do you consider a maintenance item? What do you consider something that's less than a maintenance item? And we went through that list and marked it. We're still having discussions about that. And when our chair, Ron Wick, I don't know how that got in any order, but that was for discussion purposes only. Some of us thought, well, maybe that would work, would have a $25,000 threshold. But it was all in discussion mode. It wasn't meant to be binding on our authority members at the time. But the $8 million at least goes on to say, and if you look at it closely, it says, at any time the maintenance and improvement fund reaches or exceeds a balance of $8 million, the county shall temporarily suspend the maintenance payments until such time as the maintenance and improvement fund balance drops below $8 million, at which time the county shall reinstitute the maintenance payments until the balance in the maintenance improvement fund reaches or exceeds a balance of $8 million. So that money will be used for maintenance items. Please give us an opportunity to work together and decide what some of those items are going to be. We don't know. I don't know. I've got my ideas, but give us that opportunity to work that out with the authority members and with Kenny Schmitz. Says the county agrees to apply the remaining 80% of the additional revenues to the reduction of property tax liability in the Woodbury County, Iowa. And that ties in with those maintenance payments. It's laid out really well in the lease. It's clear. I don't think there's any question about how this reads. And it talks about the authority shall maintain the facility in good order, condition and repair, expand, improve, and make repairs and replacements to the facility necessary for the structural soundness of the building. I'm here to tell you as an authority member, where you read expand, I'm having a devil of a time getting the original existing facility constructed, and so we can open the doors and occupy it. I don't think we have to worry about expansion, but we can work together on that. We really can. And you're right, the communication's very important. And Supervisor Nelson has stepped that up. We have Ron Wick, Mark Nelson, and myself. We have such a good working relationship that today you mentioned the media policy that we discussed. And it didn't pass. We didn't adopt it. We moved on. But we had an honest, open discussion. And that's what we're doing with the maintenance fund. That's what we're doing with maintenance items, repairs, and that kind of thing. So I would ask the board to please, I guess I don't have to talk about insurance because you've already said that's, and that's unfortunate. I wish we could have anticipated that kind of premium on the building. You know,
That's on us, Dan, don't worry.
No, I know, but
I mean, for us to be knowing in our
I
budget,
still
yeah.
follow the team approach, Jeremy, and I probably always will, probably to a fault, because I like the capacity of being on an authority as opposed to the city council working with the supervisors. It's been.
And Dan, I wanted to throw something out there for clarification.
Okay.
Because in this agenda item, I don't see it as us trying to get rid of a maintenance fund. I have no intention of getting rid of a maintenance fund. But I'm trying to point out that we are levying $400,000 for the maintenance fund And in our building services budget, we had something like 341,000 additional.
Yes.
170, yeah.
Well, yeah, and I was looking at all machinery, equipment, everything that was in there, in the budget right here, and added it up. And yeah, we did reduce it to 177, but I guess we're just trying to.
With all due respect, though, when you call it double taxation, I want to go back to how we even got this started and the condition of the existing law enforcement facility. That will cause division. That will cause, on my part, that will get me excited. Because if we go out and tell the taxpayers, you're getting doubly taxed, you got to give them all of this background of how we got to where we are and why we even talked about a new jail facility. What was going on with the existing one? You know better than anybody what was happening. So that, I just want the entire story to be told. I want to work with the board, and I would hope that you would give us the time to work through this and wait till I'm sorry, I'm so dry because of my allergies really kicking me today, but give us the time to work on those issues, those questions that are being raised. That's all I'm asking. So thank you for letting me probably go over 3 minutes.
Can I respond to one thing?
Sure.
Thanks. And Dan, I have an enormous amount of respect for you, and I appreciate the history. I just want to reiterate, as Supervisor Radig said, the maintenance fund is not even being contemplated. It's what is this board taxing? Is it appropriate to tax 170 or 300 or 500,000 more? And then the other thing I just want to correct the record on, the initial lease specified $400,000 a year. It's not that we amended it at some point and increased it by double. I want the public to know, and you referenced it, Dan, and I appreciate it, $200,000 per semi-annual payment, November 1st, 2021, thereafter on the first day of May and November in each year. It's always been $400,000. That hasn't changed. I wouldn't have voted to increase it by $1 because I think $8 million is enough, and I don't think $8 million plus $3.4 million over 20 years is
So I should correct myself.
Yeah, I just
misspoke.
yeah,
It
I
was
just
not
wanted to make sure
increased.
that they
It was
didn't think-
changed because we
the 80-20 split.
we were gonna levy it first instead of taking it out of the payments.
I just didn't want people to think we voted to double it, and why are we concerned?
Supervisor Taylor, I appreciate your comments. As long as we maintain the jail facility, the building, over the years, the $8 million probably will be adequate. But if for some reason that slips, I can't remember what the estimates were for the existing facility to bring it up to speed to what we need to do. If that slips away and gets away from us for whatever reason, that $8 million will not be enough.
Yeah, and you're right, it can't, because this lease says that this board owes that to you guys every single year. So that, I just want you to know, that's not even being contemplated. $400,000 in taxpayer funds will be allocated every year.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead.
Ron Wick, 4362 Old Lakeport Road. I'd just like to talk a little bit about how we come up with the number for the maintenance fund. Dale Drent went through every square inch of that building, every piece of machinery, every warranty, the expected life on everything, including the concrete. It wasn't just the air conditioning unit. When this number was put together, it was based on an expert's opinion on where we ought to be on a maintenance fund. And I think that we owe that to the people of Woodbury County. I think we need to let them know that this facility, we're not going to open that door until it's done 100% like it's supposed to be. We're not going to repeat the history of 1985. And by having the maintenance fund and having that in place, that means that that building will continually to be properly maintained and will be here for decades for the people of Woodbury County. That's my commitment. I won't accept anything else. And I appreciate those of you that are willing to support the authority. The authority is here to work with the Board of Supervisors. I appreciate that opportunity. But working together, we can deliver to the people of Woodbury County what we promised them. Hacking away at something that is so critical as that maintenance fund doesn't do what we need to do for the people of Woodbury County. Thank you.
And again, I just want to say, I have no intention of removing the maintenance fund.
And neither do I.
This is just to discuss what the county itself is going to pay into additional maintenance.
Chairman Wick, could I ask you a question? Sure. What is your, as a representative, obviously, of the authority, the other party to the lease, we've heard some comments from the city representative, and also we know where Mark Nelson's at. What can you tell us or the public, or especially Mr. Taylor, on your thoughts on the timing of a third revision to the lease, when and how that would work out, and if you just want to explain why that isn't now?
We are very wrapped up right now in trying to get that building done and the front door opened on it and get inmates moved from the old building. We all know what Kenny's concerned about on a daily basis in that old building. Let's get this building open. Let's get those inmates out of that current building. Let's get them out to 3701 28th Street. And then let's sit down and see where we need to go.
And I'd be amenable to that. I just want to make sure that we reduce 170,000.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So out of curiosity, are you looking to reduce the 170,000 just in the maintenance side for the county's budget?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
just so I'm clear, and I don't want there to be any confusion in the media or the many hundreds of YouTube viewers, the maintenance fund allocations will continue. Those will not go away. Those will not be touched. We're legally bound. So November, and I did the math, November 1st, 2024, there will be 1.4 million. May 1st of 2025, 1.6, and it will continue to grow. Again, what I want us to contemplate is the additional money that we are volunteering taxpayer dollars on over and above that is not a requirement of the lease.
So personally, next week, I don't know that I'd support removing the 177 this year because we do not know what kind of damages will be caused by our staff or inmates, which would be our cost. I sure hope it's not 170,000, but I mean, this is for the three that are gonna be here next year on this board making decisions, and David, you know, pay attention to if you end up here in this chair. You know, the county's responsibility, if it ends up only 25,000 over the next calendar year, maybe we only budget 35,000 or something, not 177 for the county side. You know, things that are billed to the authority, Kenny needs to bill to the authority. And I think, you know, you work well enough with them as far as, you know, saying, okay, this is maintenance, this is the LEC authority's bill, and you send it to them. So.
There's just a few comments I'd like to make. I don't disagree that the lease probably needs another amendment at some point. This isn't the time. We don't have time for that right now. There are some things in it that need to be identified. So I'm going to ask you an odd question. Where does it say in the lease that Woodbury County Building Services is going to conduct the repairs in the facility? Where does it say Woodbury County Building Services is going to provide the staff for that facility? It doesn't. So there was some, early on when this lease was drafted, there was a lot of intent. There was a lot of agreements that weren't in writing, but there was intent. And the intent was talked about. So there's a lot of things you don't read in the lines that are on the lease because they never were identified. They were talked about, and everyone made assumptions. Everyone said it was going to be like this, but it's not in the lease. So yes, it needs to be amended on some items. I know you all receive texts, phone calls, emails about this facility and the delays it's taking to get it open. As Ron Wick said, we are not going to let this facility open unless it's done correctly. If it takes until August, that's what it's going to take. We can't let it open until it's ready and it's correct. We don't need the disaster of yesteryears in our hands. So therefore, it's worth our time, I believe, to get it done right. And we're getting very, very close. We're working a lot of hours. Everyone's putting in a lot of time. I know even the authority members are all getting calls and emails and working as hard as they can, even with the attorneys that are now involved and the engineers. And so we're just trying to work through that as best we can, but we don't need any additional items on our plate at this time. Thanks.
And I think the reason we haven't come down on Kenny's department and criticized you for doing things outside of technically the lease is we realize, as we've all said in different contexts at different times in different ways, it's all the county's money. At the end of the day, it's the county's money. And even after 20 years, the money goes back to the county. So it's not given to some other entity to do whatever it wants to and expand some other jail. It's the county's money, and it stays the county's money. And we're facing the same issues now on a smaller scale, just like what you mentioned. A lot of people don't realize the smaller issues and questions you might have that you just work collaboratively with the authority and with the board to exact the repair. And it's only 1.2 or 1.4 million, which, again, to the public, sounds like we've just built up this fund. It's only that way because it was late opening. I mean, it wouldn't be 1.2 or 1.4 million in all likelihood today if it opened exactly on time. And if all the bad things didn't happen and all the parties worked perfectly, just as good as Kenny does, it wouldn't be a big number we'd be shocking the public with, meeting after meeting, saying we have all this built up. It's not the intent to build it up. There's no intent to build up necessarily $8 million. That's simply a cap. And thankfully there is a cap. I think I remember there being larger numbers floated before. Was it 10 before? Do you remember? Yeah, so we arrived at this number by discussion and realizing that if we do get if the sheriff is able to have more and more contracts and more bed spaces utilized, then we want to make sure that the county gets the benefit of that, rather than a maintenance fund, in that case, being built up beyond what these experts had apparently forecasted and recommended.
If I could just
Yes.
informationally, Chairman Wick brought up Dale Drent, and just for the good of the public, I think we assume Dale Drent is one of the chief engineers at the Baker Group, and he is I've worked with him on the school district side, very, very sharp person, so I will acknowledge that. and he identified the $8 million that was sufficient.
Yeah, thank you. We name drop people all the time, but public doesn't always know what we're talking about. Mr. Moore, you got something else?
Just real quick, thank you. Could you clarify for me, because I'm not sure I'm tracking where the insurance premium is like 177,000.
Yeah.
What's the 170,000
So the one-
being referred to?
The $170,000, Dan, is something that in the FY25 budget that we allocated over and above. For example, HVAC repairs to the new LAC facility, $60,000. So that's what's giving me heartburn to say, why are we allocating another $170,000 when we have $1.2 million sitting there in the maintenance fund? Why are this is where I'm talking about the AA taxing. Nothing that we're doing on the maintenance fund in and of itself, but this board went through and allocated $170,000 additionally over and above that $400,000 a year maintenance fund cost. And to me, that's inappropriate because those funds are there. You will be good stewards of it, I have no doubt. But to say and I respectfully, the damage to inmates or employees, if we think that they're gonna do $177,000 worth of damage, we got bigger issues. I could see 10,000 or 20, but to be able to look people in the eye and say, we're being good stewards, I don't think we are. Just our board, not you all.
Is that something, though, that could be postponed till we get it opened?
I just don't know, going through the budget hearing and certifying a budget that taxes $170,000 more, and then the facility opens, what would we do any differently, even 6 months down the road? My worry is that Kenny's gonna be in a position, and we gave the scenario kind of in real time, he's gonna be asked to make a repair from county funds of $18,000, $23,000, and is he supposed to go to the county funds from Woodbury County or go to the maintenance fund? There's nothing in the lease that says anything about a $25,000 big ticket or anything like that. And so the lease, I think, is incumbent upon all of you to use the $1.2, $1.4, $1.6 million that you have to do these items. And by the way, Dale Drent, who I highly respect, says in the first 8 or 9 years, you don't reach even that $1 million threshold. I looked at his sheet. So why are we asking $170,000 in additional county funds?
Thanks for the clarification.
Kenny Schmitz?
I do just really want to bring this to the board's attention. We are almost at the end of FY24 in our budget. That means on June 30th, the current LEC budget, old LEC budget, is going away. We're at the end of the year. The new 25 LEC budget for the new LEC at 3701 28th Street comes online July 1st. So what I'm saying is, as long as we're occupying the old facility and we're not yet in the new facility, if that date is after July 1st, we are going to have expenses incurred from the old facility that are being applied to the new LEC budget, because there won't be any other budget to draw from.
Well, the current LEC authority's estimate is mid-July, I believe. So if everyone believes that in their heart of hearts, we still will have that situation.
Yes.
And where would those funds come from if they weren't padded by the FY25 budget, so to speak?
That would be a finance director question. There would be no funds in my mind.
I guess in some ways you have a new facility that you're not occupying and you're not encumbering expenses on. So a 2-week period to me can't seem.
And also, another point I'd like to make is we talk a lot about the new opening date of July 1st. what we really should be saying is substantial completion date, because opening date and substantial completion date are two different things. So substantial completion date is going to be July 1st. That's the date, hopefully, that our contractor would tell us it's yours. What that means to building services is, we now have the green light, start moving. And we can't do that overnight. So there's going to be probably a 3 to 4 week period in there where we have to get the county's equipment, people, inmates, kitchen equipment. I have a whole board full of items that have to be completed in that period.
Yeah, I'm just, I don't know if pessimistic is the right word, but I'll believe it when I see it approach, and I don't really hold that against anyone here because we're dealing with other parties, very large parties in this situation, but I just find it interesting that we're just getting, kicked in the gut with each delay, and now mid-July, are we really going to say, okay, this is the one? Let's budget based on this. Let's allocate funds. Let's move things around. What does the board have to gain when it's all our money anyway? I don't understand. I mean, we can't guarantee as a board that the estimated date is going to happen, and we can't tell the sheriff when to move the inmates. There's so many things outside of our control, not the least of which that we are a tenant, technically. So, yeah, I mean, I would love for us all to agree that it's going to be July 1 or mid-July, but an estimate is what, as I've said before, what the authority, not putting words in your mouth, this is what I would interpret it as, estimated completion is what the authority or the person estimating it or entity estimating it would say a competent third party doing the work would complete the work by, based upon all information, expert opinion, owner's representatives, consulting, experience, and advice. That is what you believe. That's not a guarantee. That's just what the estimate is. And so, again, budgeting based off an estimate would have hurt us at every point, and we're still dealing with an estimate until it's open. The saying, it's not over till it's over. It's not open until it's open. And then it is open. And then
Correct.
we have an exact date. We know the budgets. We know the items. We know what we're going to have to pay for the old jail. There's going to be unforeseen expenses for the old jail. Just getting things out. Just getting it ready for the next phase and what we're going to do with that property.
Right. And I didn't mean to sound pessimistic. We've had some, what I consider some very good news recently on our target date. And all the parties are working together very hard. And when I say all the parties, I do mean all of the parties. That's not something we've always had in the past, and I believe we have it now. And things seem to be moving much more rapidly, so that's good news.
I mean, as far as a continuation of our discussion during the budget, personally, I don't see changing the allocation to 170 next week. Like I said, we don't know what we're gonna face, I guess, in inmate and county employee damage, but now you bring up, okay, well, what if we gotta keep paying for the old building too? That's a contingency we have in there, so personally, I don't see removing the 170, especially because we are passing a budget with a reduction in the levy already. But I still think everybody that's gonna be here next year, be on notice, we're gonna have to figure it out, because we don't know these numbers.
And so just to kind of close the loop on it, the funding of the $177,000, that is a county expense. I think we all recognize that from insurance. You all are contemplating taking that additionally from reserves, I take it, rather than any reallocation. Because I'm understanding, I'm not going to force the, county's position on longstanding necessary lease issues. I'm glad the public knows now that these issues are real issues. I think that they're going to be longstanding unless they're, but I would like to have an up or down vote. Otherwise, I just will defer it to the budget. I voted on 11 budgets in a row, whether in the House or here, but this is a bridge too far. I think it's waste, and I think the public will recognize it as such. So that's where I'm at.
And that's okay to think that way. I think what you have to realize and what the public needs to realize is that the work that Dale Drent did was to look at, as Matthew said earlier, Chairman Ung, the above and beyond expenses. The problem with the old jail was that they only operated it, they did not maintain it. And there is a difference. There are maintenance repairs that are gonna happen almost every day that Kenny and his people are gonna have to do that are not a big expense. And it's not utilities either. There will be repairs. And that's why Kenny's line item for that is not zero, will not be zero. Dale Drent never envisioned in his work that the maintenance fund was used for paying for light bulbs and doorknob replacement. Just like, think of it as your car. You have a fund to replace the engine and the transmission, but yes, you still have to replace tires, you still have to replace a front end, that type of thing. It was those big ticket items. And we can discuss that cap or what is a big ticket item, that's fine. But the county was always going, and this is the way it was pitched to the public, was a maintenance fund. The county was going to operate it. There are operational repairs and maintenance that have to come in with that, but there are other maintenance repairs that are above and beyond, that are large, that the maintenance fund and the LEC needed to take care of. Kenny's budget, regardless of the old LEC or any of this other stuff, it is not gonna be zero. It can't be zero. I'm not saying that 170 may be way too high. Could be 2 times as much too high. It also could be half as low. We don't know at this point because we've never operated it. And I think he has done the work to say, I think this is what it's gonna take. And hopefully not, But it is not zero. It is not $10. The maintenance fund was never intended to replace doorknobs and light bulbs or paint parking lines. That's what the county was supposed to do. We operate it, they maintain it with the maintenance fund. And Baker said, we're gonna need $10 million over 20 years to maintain it, not replace light bulbs. So that's about as clear as it can get. And the insurance, yes, we dropped the ball. We didn't know that was gonna need to be budgeted, but that was also an expense that we were gonna have to incur. It's been in the lease this whole time. So to say that we're double taxing, we're giving this money, no, this is exactly how it was pitched, that the county would operate it, the LEC would make sure that it never fell into disrepair, and those are 2 totally separate things. And I remember being part of many of those pitch meetings and going out to people in our area to vote for the jail, to turn out for the referendum, that we were going to have a separate fund to make sure it never fell into disrepair, and that is totally different than operating.
So Mr. Taylor, so despite the balance of the maintenance fund with the LEC and the $400,000 annually that's being taxed, you've said you're not, quote, going after the maintenance fund. I think we all can give you that. Is it accurate to say you're not in favor of, if the lease was amended, you would not be trying to reduce the allocation from the county? If those discussions were had today with the authority?
Correct.
Okay. So, and I don't mean this as a trick question, but just help me understand. If we're looking at that as some sort of a contingency, because it is, and we're also looking at Kenny's FY25 budget as some sort of a short-term contingency upon issues that we face with the old or new or combination of the jails, I think contingency is a fair personification of those funds. We don't want to be caught with every bad news item that comes along going back to reserves again and again and again. This is a bad news item as far as unbudgeted insurance premium. We're going, to reserves. But why make that happen more? So my question is if you're not in favor of reducing the $400,000 that we're taxing Woodbury County residents in the LAC Authority Maintenance Fund, why are you in favor of reducing the contingency for Kenny?
I'll explain that. Because you're taxing $570,000 a year instead of the $400,000 that was promised to people. To Supervisor Nelson's previous, when this thing was pitched, it was pitched with this maintenance fund, and that they got down into the weeds that we're not going to change light bulbs. Kenny has a light bulb budget. We talked about that before. But nobody was told, hey, we need $11.4 million. We need $170,000 more. I don't know of a taxpayer who knows that. So to be able, and this is my concern, and we brought it up, and it was demonstrated for you. If Kenny's presented with a $26,000 item, it could go from that $170,000. Another $24,000 item from that. It's not even tapping the maintenance fund. You're tapping taxpayers one more time. That $170,000 could be depleted, and you know why? Because we're building this thing up. And two, I've been on the board for quite a time to this idea, well, the maintenance fund was never intended for this. Says who? I mean, where is that in the lease? Where is big ticket? Where is 25,000? Where are the records of these meetings that supposedly this is what everybody said? I respect Dale Drent tremendously, but he's not elected. And he's not in charge of making budget decisions on behalf of taxpayers. And to the point that we cede that authority, we do so to the detriment of what we were called to do, in my opinion. I hope that answers my reservation on giving $170,000 that can be whittled away so that we don't touch a maintenance fund that's designed for maintenance.
To say we promised the taxpayers this or that doesn't make any sense because we didn't know what it was gonna take to operate the building. So to have this pretense that 4 years ago, that there was some vague promise to the taxpayers it was gonna cost to operate the jail, we didn't know. We didn't know.
But you were positing just a couple of minutes ago, you were saying, this is what it was always promised. It was $8 million and it was only for big ticket item. Said who? Nobody ever said that.
When it was pitched to the voters to turn out for the referendum, it was understood that there was going to be a totally separate maintenance fund, not operational costs, for operational costs.
Nobody's
but for
talking about
maintenance.
operational. No one's talking about
That's
it.
170, is my opinion, most of that's operational.
HVAC repairs of $60,000 is operational. I worked in that world with the Baker Group. They would never say that. I don't know anybody in operations and maintenance that would say $60,000, and think about this term, HVAC repairs is operational. It makes no sense. I think the public will see it, and that's where I'm at.
And I agree to disagree, because again, you can have large expenses on a car that are not a major ticket item. And so, again, it's going to take operational money to run this jail above and beyond what was promised as a maintenance fund. And so I think taking Kenny's budget down to zero is absolutely foolish, especially when we talk about the old LEC. It's the first year. It just makes no sense. It just makes no sense.
And I will say, I am appreciative of your asking your fellow LAC members to use the maintenance fund for this first year completely, which is what you asked. You said that $170,000 should come from the maintenance fund. I don't know if you're on the same position tonight, but I'm appreciative that you asked that, because I think you recognize that, it's built up over and above for taxpayers. So I'm appreciative of you at least asking. I know it didn't carry, but I'm appreciative of you seeing that at least at the time.
And there's still a silver lining to the timeline and the delay in that it's now essentially a 19 or maybe 18.5 year maintenance fund, since the 20 years did begin when the 20 years began.
Almost 16 now.
Really?
40. Yep. And I would encourage everybody to read the lease if you haven't read it, 2040. So we have, 16 years, and hopefully we can be a county building.
Any more discussion? Any public input? All right. Hearing none, move on to item 13, reports on committee meetings. I think we had an excellent town hall in Lawton recently. Over 60 people showed up, and we had spirited discussion on the never-ending wind turbine debate. And I think it was, I don't think it was disrespectful to anybody. I think everyone was above board, but there's still some healthy disagreement on a lot of different topics, and I think that's actually good to see that there's that ability. And we had a lot of helpful updates from Dan's office, from Mark Dara's office, and really appreciate all of that. The hospitality of the mayor and his council. They have a lot to be proud of with their new City Hall building, and the conference area was very, very helpful. So, yeah, we received a lot of good comments from people that really appreciated us being out there and just appreciated seeing what our thought processes were on a lot of different things. And of course, not being limited to 3 minutes means we got out even later than we will tonight. And that's part of government. That's the part I actually like even more than board meetings. So, any other reports on committees?
Oh, go ahead if you. So I had SEDC funded a loan for a regional cattle panel company. Cattle panel company. And then Community Action Agency, you guys do get those minutes, so we did have our new officers elected and everything for that board. I also met with Cherokee's Economic Development out in Cherokee County, just to discuss, things that they're doing, kind of see, are we, because we don't have a director anymore, and just, trying to stay fresh. Did stand out in a field next to some wind turbines. I did hear one say to the other, "What is your favorite music?" And the other one said, "I'm a big metal fan." Sorry.
The wind turbine apologized, or you're apologizing for the joke?
He's a dad, so you just let it pass, just that's part of it.
Good job. Any other reports? Hearing none, any citizen concerns for items not already addressed on the agenda? Final item, any board concerns? Mr. Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a question, the roundabout discussion at the church?
Tomorrow night, 4 o'clock.
So just wanted to make sure that we didn't have a quorum of interested supervisors. No. Okay.
No.
Well, I'll make my way there from the long distance away from my place.
All right, any other board concerns?